Late one night at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a discovery that could rock humanity is uncovered by a young woman and her singular vision of physics. Brenda Dillon, after receiving her PhD, has formulated a theory that all life on Earth is the natural progression of gravity. She is so overwhelmed by this discovery that she will not rest until she can prove this theory to the world and herself. This quest will dominate her life from this moment onward and will be the driving force in all her future endeavors. Decades later, Brenda Dillon sees an opportunity to prove her theory that gravity spawned life on Earth. The world's press listens as she describes the disasters facing the planet: the floods, the volcanoes, the extreme weather, the fires, the dangerous air, and earthquakes. She insists that her Zephyr Corporation can save humanity by moving the planet Mars closer to Earth to create a lifeboat scenario. Dillon explains she will use the knowledge found in her magnificent gravity doctrine. Of course, proving her theory of humanity is far more important to Brenda than just merely saving her fellow humans. A mega yacht cruises the South Pacific waters. This impressive vessel belongs to a small group of humans. They call themselves the Shepherds. The Shepherds control most of the world's commerce. Their intricate system of manipulation, bribery, and all-out power dictates the who, what, where, why, and how of humanity. The Shepherds do not control Brenda Dillon and the Zephyr Corporation, and the mission to move Mars may not be on their agenda. The first meeting of the command crew of the Deep Venture mission to Mars, Ken Tapston, Kathy Hampton, and Andy Crenshaw, takes place just outside of Brenda Dillon's Zephyr rocket factory. The Shepherds send their calling card to the Mars mission by attacking the outside of the plant with deadly drones. The attack sends the crew running for their lives, but they find cover and wait out the attack. Once inside the safety of the rocket factory, the crew inspects their outer space home for the next 2 years, the Deep Venture. The crew gather to discuss the purpose and the ethics of the mission to move the planet Mars. They comment on the explosions outside and wonder which group is behind the attack and why. They discuss Brenda Dillon and speculate on her ultimate motivations for anything she does. Ken knows a lot about Brenda, as they were romantically linked several years ago. A normal day for the Shepherds consists of starting wars, assassinating politicians, creating drug addicts, spreading massive propaganda throughout all media, creating pandemics, manipulating the stock market, and generating massive wealth transfer events. But today they discuss the plan to move Mars. The final vote is 15-5 to allow the plan. There is a hierarchy in this group of control oligarchs, and the 5 most powerful Shepherds have all voted no to this insanity. After inspecting the damage to the outside of her factory, Brenda Dillon spends time in her most ambitious creation, the Deep Venture spacecraft, which is scheduled to leave for Mars in a few months. Dan Smith, a Zephyr employee and an ex-lover of Dillon, surprises Brenda as she marvels at her gravity-altering machine. Dillon hopes this device will prove her theory that gravity is the source of human life on Earth. A few days later, Ken and Kathy join Andy at a seaside bar. Andy is going over schematics of the medical evaluator on the Deep Venture. The device is brand new and causing problems. Ken departs and leaves Andy and Kathy to enjoy the view and each other. Brenda and Ken discuss the Mars mission and their past relationship in her office. Ken explains that he just didn't understand Brenda, that their wavelengths were so far apart it was painful sometimes. Dillon asks if he might be interested to try one more time. Ken says he'll think about it. He'll have an answer when he returns from Mars. 5 months and 25 million miles later, the Deep Venture finally approaches the Red Planet. The crew meet in the command center. Professor Gentry, the scientist on the mission, voices his opinion on the professionalism of the crew. Ken Tapston and Gentry have words and tension builds on the Deep Venture. The crew disperses and duties are performed. Conditions of the surface of the sun could indicate danger for the Earth and the crew of the Deep Venture. The Shepherds gather on their tropical island retreat, complete with an indoor basketball court where it's the survival of the fittest. On the court, a showdown is just about to take place. The Shepherds use violent, full-court basketball games to establish and maintain hierarchy in the organization. The same five have held the top spots for many years, but their strength may be wavering. On this occasion, the number 1 shepherd offers a complete beatdown to number 6, and the status quo is maintained for now. There is a subtle change inside the Deep Venture. The crew is starting to feel uneasy. It could be the influence of the Red Planet. Brenda Dillon informs the crew that massive demonstrations against moving Mars are growing in most major cities. Dillon is outraged by this, as it may affect her ability for the ground operations for the Deep Venture. She informs the crew that the protests are her concern, but the sudden increase in solar activity is definitely the crew's problem. Ken Tapston and Professor Gentry have a fight over who's in charge of the Deep Venture. Gentry claims his gravitational knowledge and data-gathering instruments are the only reason the mission exists. Tapston tells Gentry to calm down, or he'll just be jettisoned into space without his helmet. Brenda Dillon storms into her office yelling at staff members to find out who is behind these massive protests. As her Zephyr staff tries to gather information on the protests, Brenda slips away to an empty office and confronts another similar time in her life when she was facing an unknown future. Waiting for her parents at her 3rd grade science fair, Brenda is extremely excited as her gravity experiment won first place. When her parents arrive, they congratulate her, but they need to leave now. They scoop up Brenda, place her in the family car, and drive away. Brenda will never see her school, home, or friends again. Besides orchestrating the worldwide protests, the Shepherds also direct their army of hackers to penetrate the Zephyr network and take whatever they can. Dillon's entire plan, her gravity doctrine, is extracted, deciphered, and delivered to the Shepherds. As the ship quiets down, Kathy and Andy spend some time in the observation deck alone. Kathy inquires about how Andy and Ken seem to always be in sync. Andy explains they met surfing one day on a gigantic rogue wave. Andy almost died as he lost his balance at the top of the wave, but suddenly he felt another presence. Somehow he and Ken had a mental connection, and the result was an amazing ride for both of them. Kathy asks, what could have caused the connection? Andy explains that it could have been several events all taking place at the same time, and they were just lucky recipients. The events were Good Friday at sunset, a full moon with a lunar eclipse, super high tides, and the vernal equinox. The combination of these events saved Andy's life and created a lifelong friendship. The Shepherds examined Dillon's gravity doctrine and determined she is using this initial Mars mission to prove her theory that all life on Earth was produced by gravity. Even if this is true, the Shepherds can never let this information leak out. Tapston decides to deploy the solar shield as a precaution against any mass coronal ejections. He orders the crew to meet at the airlock. Andy, Tapston and Kathy maneuver outside the Deep Venture to deploy the solar shield. After struggling with the shield, the complicated piece of equipment is finally in place. After admiring their work, the 3 astronauts maneuver back inside the ship. Somewhere in a dark compartment of the Deep Venture, a remote control detonation device is activated. Outside the ship, on the struts that hold the solar shield in place, small black boxes start flashing red lights. In the silence of space, 3 of the 4 support struts explode, and the solar shield is now hanging by a thread, leaving no protection for the ship. Ken and Andy immediately realize what has happened, and both rush to the airlock. Lockers fly open as repair gear is grabbed for their mission outside. Andy also grabs guns for Kathy and Marla. The solar flare will arrive in minutes, and all Andy can say is, keep your eyes open before he and Ken put on their helmets and dash into the airlock. Ken and Andy survey the damage to the shield, and just like on that giant wave many years ago, their mental link reappears. They use one focused consciousness to fix what they can of the shield and return to the safety of the ship. Once inside, they find Kathy shot, lying on the floor, Sam with his face blown off dead, and Marla standing guard with her gun at the ready. The solar flare bombards the Deep Venture, but the repaired shield holds and only minimum damage is suffered by the ship. 8 well-dressed men invade Brenda Dillon's office. They kidnap her, move her out of her building, and place her in a waiting helicopter. The black helicopter lands on a super yacht. Brenda is escorted inside where 5 shepherds await her. The shepherds introduce themselves as just a few men and women who manage world affairs and sometimes point countries and corporations in certain directions. Brenda is now given a choice. She must abandon her quest to prove gravity is the source of all life, and destroy the Deep Venture while in Martian orbit, or everyone she has ever met or worked with will be killed, jailed, or simply just disappear. Her company will be dissolved, and of course, she will be the last one to go. Marla is still in shock as she explains that Sam and Dr. Gentry came in firing, but they were ready. Kathy hit Sam square in the face, but Gentry blew a hole in Kathy's side. Marla managed to wound Gentry in the shoulder, and then he just disappeared. Andy calmly tells Marla that danger is over and to stand down. Kathy needs their help. While Tapston checks the damage to the ship in the command center, Andy tries to help the wounded Kathy. She has a massive hole in her side. Kathy painfully mentions that all her secrets are now visible. Andy places his hand on her heart and says he only wants the secrets in here. Brenda asks for a moment. She moves to the upper deck, searching the heavens for a way out of this predicament. Ken takes over in frenetic action. He barks out orders to move Kathy up on a table. Ken waits for Andy. Andy finally realizes that the medical evaluator is required. He turns on the device, and all hell breaks loose. The medical machine somehow senses a contamination leak and begins to open an emergency hatch. Decompression begins, but Ken shuts down the device, and calm returns for the moment. Brenda rejoins the Shepherds and attempts to negotiate. Brenda reminds the Shepherds that the devil offered Jesus all the kingdoms of the world in return for worshipping him. Brenda asks, what will these devils offer her in return for her worship? The Shepherds discuss for a moment between themselves and then offer Brenda an answer. We won't kill you. Brenda is taken outside to the waiting helicopter. She is handed a small device with software that will cause the Deep Venture to crash into the surface of Mars. She has no choice but to take it. Ken, Andy, and Marla stabilize Kathy's wounds the best they can. Kathy is still unconscious. The gaping hole in her side and the damage to her internal organs are no match for the 3 crew members. As they begin to relax, blaring warning alarms suddenly come to life. Ken shuts off the alarm and determines that there has been unauthorized entry into the engine room. Ken instructs Andy to stay with Kathy and orders Marla to follow him to the engine room with firearms. The Shepherds drop Brenda off at the Zephyr factory with her new instructions. She stands in the rain, dazed, unable to move. Finally, she slowly makes her way into the empty rocket factory. Completely alone, she thinks of her father and her life on the run. The night of the science fair, her father, who had discovered a procedure to neutralize the plutonium-239 in nuclear weapons, realized that his entire family was a target for assassination. That night, he destroyed his research and had no choice but to escape the country. They landed in Central Europe and just disappeared into a small town. They kept to themselves as Brenda's father homeschooled her with all his magic of science. Brenda learned that physics was as pure as anything in life, with no agenda or prejudices. Brenda decided to form her allegiances with the forces of the universe and not with other humans. As Brenda grew up, she longed to attend MIT back in the States. Her father didn't think it was a good idea to expose themselves and to stay well below the radar. It didn't matter, as the powers that be that wanted her father dead finally succeeded, and one day he was murdered in the streets. The assassins were always only after Brenda's father, as the rest of the family was not a threat. Brenda fell into a deep depression as her only true friend and mentor had abandoned her. A project that was started 12 years before would now never be complete. Dan finds Brenda alone in the factory. Brenda realizes that all her doubts about so many things were just a lack of faith, and now it's time to get to work. Ken and Marla creep towards the engine room. The view through the hatch window reveals Gentry working frantically on the engine room controls. Ken flips on the intercom and asks slowly, "What are you up to, Professor?" Gentry barks back, "I'm taking control of the ship, and I intend to pile drive her into the surface of Mars in about 20 minutes. I'm not sure why, I'm just compelled to do this. The crew should have just enough time for one last meal, of maybe shepherd's pie." Gentry clicks off the intercom and the silence is deadly. Marla screams, "We are so screwed! Can you get this open?" Sounds of the engine room hatch being double-locked. Ken thinks for a moment and tells Marla to get back to Kathy and make sure she doesn't die. Marla starts moving. "I need Andy in the control center." "Move it!" Ken yells. Andy joins Ken in the command center. Ken's plan is to turn on the medical evaluator in the engine room, and maybe the emergency hatch will open and suck Gentry out. They have to configure the evaluator so Gentry can't turn it off. Ken initiates the plan, and the emergency hatch in the engine room opens. But before Gentry is sucked into space, he pushes the firing switch for the engines, and the Deep Venture is headed straight for Mars, with little time to save the ship. While Ken and Andy fight for control of the Deep Venture, Professor Gentry floats silently in space without his helmet. Andy and Ken scramble to control the ship. The Deep Venture's engines are shut off, the ship is turned, and the engines are ignited again. Just before they run out of fuel, the engines are shut off, leaving the Deep Venture marooned in orbit around Mars. To save the Deep Venture, Brenda and Dan attack all her books on gravity and physics, looking for the one clue that has eluded her in her attempt to bring to life her gravity-altering machine. Dan stumbles upon a book about ancient Egyptian gods. He is fascinated about what he reads about the god Ra. "Listen to this," he says. "Ra became all-powerful during the 5th dynasty. Ra was every god across the entire 5-god spectrum, and every god was Ra. Get it? Every god across the entire spectrum." Brenda is stunned. The wheels in her brain start spinning. She yells, "Oh my God! That's it! I need to look at the entire spectrum of the gravity wave. The equation should be right there. It's always been right there, right in front of me." Dan is very pleased with himself as he watches Brenda leave the room to head for her lab. Brenda stops. She freezes. Dan asks, "What? Did you forget something?" Brenda turns and says, "No, I just figured out where humanity just might end up." Dan laughs. "Of course you did." Brenda continues,
No, really, it's become so painfully clear. Humanity is on a journey to become the 5th force in the universe. If gravity is our mother, humans are destined to join our siblings as one of the forces that binds the universe together.
"Sounds great. But why would anyone care about this? Remember, most humans are just trying to survive to the end of the day. Why does something that might happen in 10,000 years matter?" Brenda is quiet for a moment, and then answers,
This is for no one but me. This is just for my father. It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. This is just my truth. Understand?
With all the needed calculations and instructions set to be transmitted to the Deep Venture, Brenda and Dan relax for a moment under the stars. Dan seeks out more information on humanity becoming the 5th force. He mentions that such a transformation is an impossibility beyond the impossible. Brenda explains,
If humans are the only life form in the entire universe, shouldn't we strive for a goal that might justify our existence?
Dan laughs. "What? An occasional war and cable TV just isn't enough for you?" Brenda and Dan transmit all the gravity wave machine information to the Deep Venture by first bouncing the data file off a satellite orbiting Jupiter to keep it private. Ken and Andy are dumbfounded when they read the transmission. They discuss the very low chance of success, but realize that Gentry also dumped 5 of 6 power cells into space, leaving the Deep Venture only 2 months of power remaining. They had no other chance of survival but to use Brenda's gravity wave machine. Brenda's instructions include a brief explanation of the equations that describe specifically how space-time bends in the presence of mass. These are known as the Einstein field equations. Her gravity machine will connect to the space-time curvature and use that potential energy to propel the Deep Venture back to Earth. With Marla keeping Kathy alive, Ken and Andy begin the 30 days of work to integrate the gravity wave machine with the Deep Venture's propulsion system. Even though Andy has been checked out on the device, his questions back to Zephyr get tricky, as the relay to Jupiter doesn't always work. While Brenda, the Deep Venture and the Shepherds fight over control, the Earth just doesn't care, and a routine round of disasters strikes. Even Shepherd Island is not spared as the control oligarchs quickly leave and move to quieter accommodations. The Shepherds grow tired of waiting for Brenda to perform and instruct the well-dressed men to kill her assistant Dan to get her attention. As Dan leaves the Zephyr factory one night in the rain, his car is tracked from behind. Suddenly, his car explodes and burns. The fire department eventually responds, but there is nothing left. In the distance, a silhouette is seen limping away, His clothes seem to smolder. TV news anchors report the destruction of the Deep Venture as it approached Mars. It may have even crashed on the surface. Details are still being gathered. Shepard number 6 and 7 meet in their Swiss Alps chalet and discuss the Deep Venture. 6 mentions they should try and help Brenda Dillon with her struggles against the top 5. It could be advantageous for their own personal gain. Number 7 is confused. He is sure the spaceship has already crashed and all aboard are dead. 6 informs him that, no, they are still alive, but in deep trouble. Zephyr's control center is alive with activity. Brenda is in the back, monitoring the situation. A well-dressed man is also in the room. Control is waiting on a response from the Deep Venture regarding a new software update to extend their failing life support system. The response crackles over the speakers.
Zephyr, Deep Venture reporting. Software installed, immediate problems, engines firing. We have no control, losing altitude. We're burning up. Venture.
The room goes silent. Brenda reacts. Get them back! A controller responds. The signal has gone dead. Brenda repeats. Get them back! Ken, Andy, and Marla sit in the command center. Andy begins. Are we ready for this? Ken, just like the big wave. I think it's the only way we can make this one. Marla chimes in. What in the hell are you guys talking about? Ken shakes his head and offers a nothing. Just make sure you're strapped in. Ken and Andy exchange glances as the gravity machine is brought online. A deep whine of the machine is heard and felt with tremendous vibration. Ken and Andy's fingers magically fly over the control switches as they overlap in a symphony of precision. Brenda Dillon's gravity wave machine comes to life and exposes the gravity well that Mars rests in. Ken and Andy work together to fire the Deep Venture's engine at the precise instant as the wave and spaceship become one. In a blinding orange flash, the gravity well and the Deep Venture both disappear. Controller. Long-range scanners detect an orange flash in the Martian orbit. Brenda, her voice trembling. Get them back! Controller. They're gone. Brenda. I know. Brenda starts to cry. The well-dressed man has seen enough and leaves. Brenda arrives home after the eventful day at Zephyr. She looks around, and out of the corner of her eye she spots a parked car several houses away. After she enters, she turns on as many lights as possible, sets a timer, and quietly sneaks out the back door where Dan takes her across several backyards to his car. As the lights on the top floor go off, the home is engulfed in a huge explosion and fire. The parked car drives away. The Deep Venture is now traveling at unknown speeds as it loops over the sun on its way back to Earth. The ship vibrates excessively as it wasn't designed for this type of travel. Inside the Deep Venture, the vibrations are becoming stronger each day. Ken asks if the ship can take another week of this. Andy guesses the gravity wave will hold the Venture together. He hopes. Marla stands up and in a very nervous voice cries out, "Who cares about the vibrations? What about my hand? Why is it glowing?" Andy explains, "There is no data on traveling in a gravity wave. We're the first humans to try it." All three feel another presence in the room. They stand up, all shocked. Ken's astonishment is conveyed by, "Oh my God, it's Lazarus!" Kathy is standing in the doorway, smiling. Her skin matches Marla's hand with a bright glow. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a huge cargo ship cruises slowly through calm seas. On board are Brenda, Dan Smith, and Shepard's number 6 and 7. In the control center of the cargo ship, Brenda thanks Shepard number 6 for helping her retrieve the Deep Venture. Number 6 replies, "There is no free ride. The entire Zephyr industry is now in debt to him, and he will be calling sooner than later as she probably won't be alive much longer." A lookout screams that something is happening on the horizon. The captain turns the giant ship towards the light. The cargo ship eases up close to the floating spaceship. The giant crane is used to haul the ship on board. Brenda softly whispers, "I hope they are still alive." As the Deep Venture rests on the deck, ocean water slowly drains off the hull. Brenda and Dan slowly approach the main hatch. Dan acknowledges the ship is still alive as he feels the vibrations from the hull. He punches in a code, and the hatch slides open. There seems to be an eerie calm inside the ship. Brenda and Dan slowly enter. Dan and Brenda arrive at the command center where a TV monitor is blinking. Dan presses the play button, and the message begins. The crew explains that Kathy was shot during the mutiny, but made an immaculate recovery in the gravity wave. Marla was the first to be completely covered with this amazing glow, and then she just disappeared. They all expect to face the same future. The crew thought they may have sensed Marla, but it was only wishful thinking. Ken laments that he had to have his molecular structure altered to be on the same wavelength as Brenda. They wave goodbye, and the video ends. Brenda exclaims, "Did we kill them?" Dan responds with maybe. Or maybe they were absorbed into space-time, or maybe they are still here, just on a different wavelength. Brenda, for some reason, stands up with her eyes closed and her palms out in a welcoming gesture. Dan asks, What are you doing?" Brenda says she doesn't know. This just feels right. After a moment, a warm, comforting feeling washes over her face. She opens her eyes with a smile and softly says,
It's here, the fifth force.